And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. So glad that you could be here with us today. Bill has no sympathy for me when I'm telling him it's raining outside. So
I thought it never rained in Southern California.
I know, but girl, don't they warn you? I mean,
well, boom, boom. All right.
But I know it's been amazing, and I've put some video up on Instagram and some video on Twitter just to prove to people that it actually does rain in California, and that we don't always get to go swimming in the pool year round. So feel sorry for us here.
No sympathy for me. Sorry.
So welcome to people who are just starting to come in. Alan, Shannon, Marlene, how's everybody doing? Thanks for being here. Tonight, Bill, is the State of the Union address that we were supposed to have. What was it, 2 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody put the fly in the ointment on that one, though, didn't they?
Yeah, and I wonder if she'll be pleased with the results, whatever they may be after tonight's State of the Union.
I'm just wondering if she'll be sober. I mean, did I say that out loud? No, I'm sorry.
It's really weird, and we've talked about it. I watched 2 videos this morning that people had put up about her, and she's starting to be kind of incoherent at times. And I'm worried about her. Now, I know that, people, there is a rumor that, every time she goes and she travels, there's a big tab for alcohol. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it certainly is starting to get more and more difficult to understand her when she's talking. And I think for her to keep up with what she's doing. So maybe we should pray for her.
I kind of said that tongue in cheek, but,
Yeah.
I guess there are people wondering what's going on there.
Yeah. And I've said this before, and I really am. I'm not saying this to be funny. I really do think that the president, vice president, and the Speaker of the House every year should have a physical and mental health, so that the public knows. Because, the president, and right in line with the president, if something happens to the president, is a VP. If something happens to the VP, is the Speaker of the House. So I think those 3 positions each year should be letting people know how healthy they are. So,
well, that would be a good thing. So yeah, we'll pray for her, because it says to pray for our enemies. So,
exactly.
So we have to do that.
So we'll do that.
So what do you think he's going to talk about?
I think he's going to talk about absolutely the border. And he's going to be, I know he's going to be bringing people who, and Alan says, and a drug test. True, Alan. Thank you. That is important. But I think he's going to be bringing people who are really legitimate people that have concerns. For example, angel families are going to be there. People who have been on drugs that have now been clean and sober. This is with the drug issue that we have and the fentanyl coming into the United States. People from the Border Patrol. And there's I believe, a 6-year-old boy whose last name is Trump, who has been basically bullied at school because his last name is Trump. He's going to be a guest there also. And there'll be plenty of other people. They put out a list yesterday. Now, Democrats will be different.
Yeah, right. I think they've invited some people who aren't supposed to be here, right?
Yeah.
That's what I read. That's what I read anyway.
Yeah. Does that surprise you that people will be there that aren't legally in the country? And people who are supposedly people who have worked for the Trump golf course that were working there illegally, who have been fired, they're going to be inviting those people there as well. So, yeah.
But you and I couldn't walk up there and get in.
No,
it wouldn't happen, right? Citizens, the whole bit. Taxes. Yeah, you can't come in.
I mean, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had invited me to sit with her, because I'm a citizen of the United States and I pay taxes, I would have gone just to have the opportunity to go, but I will never get the opportunity from the Democrat side to go because I'm so anti their issues that it would never happen.
Yeah. And according to Michael Moore, she's now the face of the Democratic Party. She's a leader of the Democratic Party. So, okay, there you go.
And, for the first time, I agree with Michael Moore. I think she is the face.
I was about to say, this is one of those times he's probably right about something.
Yeah.
He probably is.
chalk that up the only time. Now, Darlene said a man who is redeemed and does ministry is released from prison will, with the Reform Act, will be there. And also Alice Johnson, I believe her name is Alice. She was the woman who had been in jail for almost 30 years for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's going to be there. So that's good. Like I said, people who, in my opinion, deserve to be there and an example for America to look at and maybe be role models for people who are struggling in their own lives. These will be people there for them to see. Carol said, hi, guys. Nice to see and hear from both of you again today. Glad that you're here. And Liz, Chezzy, Darlene, everybody else who's here. Jonathan's picture is frozen. Just go out and go back in, Jonathan. Sometimes that happens. So could be your connection. But yeah, I think it ought to be interesting. A lot of people are wondering, is he tonight going to say that he is going to use, declare emergency as a crisis down at the border and use the military to build the wall? I don't see that happening tonight.
I don't either. I mean, of course, Trump is kind of unpredictable, but I think he said, okay, we're going to give him to the 15th. I think that's what he's going to do. I think he's going to give him to the 15th to do something. Of course, they're not. We know that. Yeah,
right.
They've already dug in their heels, But I think he's going to give him to the 15th, and then we'll go from there. We'll see. But I do think he's, like you said, I think he's going to really make the case for why things have to be done immediately. And I think he's going to bypass Pelosi and Schumer and all those people, and he's going to speak to America. So hopefully, people will have ears to hear.
Yeah, I hope so too. I know that from what we've heard, people are on the Democrat side. They're not really negotiating. They're asking for things like, for the people coming here for asylum, they want them to have free housing, free transportation, free health care. That's what they're asking for as part of their negotiations. When that's just, I know. And also yesterday, I don't know if you heard this, Bill, but the Senate introduced a bill that in Congress that would say that the president cannot use the military funds for building of the wall. They want to block him. They feel that the courts are going to do it, but now Congress wants to pass a bill that will prevent him from doing that as well.
Well, let's see if it gets past the Senate.
Yeah. And I say that, for me, that's another reason when you say there's a crisis and you want to start building the wall, you should go ahead and do it. Because if you give the Democrats too long, they come up with all kinds of things and why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're right there. I guess, and I mean, I don't know. He hasn't told me what he's thinking, but I guess he's just trying to make it plain to all, as many Americans who are paying attention, that he's done everything he knows to do to try to negotiate and try to interact and try to have some kind of a discussion with them that they can come to some compromise. And perhaps he's just hoping it'll play out that people see the Democrats aren't willing to compromise on anything. They're just there to block him. Now, that's just my opinion. I may be dead wrong on that, but that seems to be the hand he's playing. But, I'm hopeful that when it comes right down to it, he'll do it has to be done. And I think a lot of people are going to be behind him on that. The courts won't, perhaps, right, but hopefully the people will. And we'll just see what unfolds.
Yeah, they are sending more troops down to the southwest and southern borders. We've also heard that there was about 40 buses coming over from Mexico to some part of Texas that does not have a fence, that you can just walk right over into the United States, and that those, I forget how many people are on that bus. I think it was around 1,200 people 2,000 people, for on the 40 buses that are going to be coming into the United States to seek asylum. That's what they want to do, which is crazy. And now Marlene said that frosts her cookies. We were talking about.
I'm just getting a mental image of her cookies being frosted. Now, is that with frosting or was that with ice?
I don't. Sometimes it's better you just don't ask. Darlene said it is certainly less costly for barriers than militarizing the border. Everyone needs to read the UN Global Compact for migration. They are behind this, along with other U.S. enemies.
Well, in the Cloud household, we've long been proponents of let's get out of the UN
Oh
altogether.
yeah.
So, yeah, the UN is not our friend
No.
by any means.
Never has been, never will be. So it should be interesting, and hopefully we do hear from the president from his heart again, as he typically, when he comes to anything like that, he really does speak right to the American people, and I really like that. Now
Yeah.
I'm assuming we're going to see Ruth Bader Ginsburg there tonight. There has been a sighting of her, Bill. She was at
Oh, okay.
a function last night that was sort of, I don't know, praising her. It was something about her, rewarding her. So it was all about her. So she was there. And so I'm hoping that the State of the Union address will be important enough for her to show up. I'm not counting on it, but I'm hoping that's true. Bethany said they're flooding in any way they can before the walls go up. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
Well, in regard to Ginsburg, she's an older lady. Certainly disagree with most everything she stands for. But she's an older lady, she's sick, I have sympathy for that.
Yep.
But at the same time, you're holding America hostage. She knows her time's up,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying she's going to pass. I'm just saying she knows she can't really effectively do her job on the court, and she's just holding that position as long as she can. And people were offering their organs to try to keep her alive. But I mean, it's
true that they were, and they were serious.
I know, but it seems it's just a matter of time. And this is where I have a hard time having sympathy and respect for her age and her position, in spite of the fact I totally disagree with her politics. And the lack of respect that grows with every passing day, that she doesn't just say, hey, you know what? I need to step down. I can't do this, because you're just, you're holding people hostage.
Well,
So, anyway.
You can respect her as an individual, as a person, but you don't have to respect her behaviors and her actions. And that's the way I look at it.
And at this point, I'm having a hard time doing that.
Yeah. No, I don't see anything wrong with that. Now, Carol says, was it a current event? Just saying. Carol, it was supposedly a current live event that she was at last night. So Darlene said, I don't believe she was at that function. I think they are laying the groundwork for questions that will be asked. Okay. I don't know. I'm going to have to go with she was there, but I didn't see any pictures from that event. I'll give you that. Dawn says she needs to go to her eternal reward, and she will when God says it's time. Linda said each one that comes in illegally hurts us more and more, which is absolutely true. It hurts, and it takes away from those that are here illegally. You couldn't convince people on the left of that, but I mean, that is true. Now let's talk a little bit. This has been in the news lately, and we need to talk about it a little bit more. It's kind of, it's still there, but it's kind of waning just a little bit. And I'm talking about the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam. We don't know. I mean, Bill, I don't know. First of all, let's just kind of go back into his medical yearbook. He wasn't a child when he's in medical school, just to kind of lay that out for everybody. It wasn't like Kavanaugh, who was in high school, but this was a yearbook from medical school. And apparently it came out that people could pick the pictures that they wanted in their medical school yearbook. And there was a picture of a person in blackface and a person in the KKK robe. Now, in the beginning, when they saw that, Northam came out and said, I'm so sorry. This is so racist. It's so offensive. I'm so sorry. The next day, he came out and said, I'm not so sorry. It's still racist. It's still offensive, but I don't believe that was me. Bill, any thoughts that you have on this?
Oh, this is apples and oranges. It's connected in my mind. It may not be in anyone else's, but years ago, I had a guy who said something about me, to somebody else. And so when I called him up to, confront him about it, I'm like, did you say that? And he said, well, I don't remember saying that. I mean, which is like, oh yeah, I said that, but I don't have the guts to admit it.
Right.
So I don't think that's me in the picture. Come on. You're parsing words here. You're trying to skate around it. It's you, or you're one or the other. And even if you aren't one or the other, why did you think it was okay to put something like that? Okay, look,
right.
in the 80s, things were obviously a lot different than they are now. People had a little more relaxed views about some things. Not that they were right, just a little more relaxed. So, I can see somebody decide, well, okay, this will be okay. As far as the blackface, if you're going to pretend you're Michael Jackson, okay. But the robe, the Ku Klux Klan, nah. I grew up in the South. No, we would not have done that. We knew better. So, but to me, the bigger issue is this, Susan, and this is something we've talked about from time to time. When all these people were coming out with the Kavanaugh thing, making all these accusations against Trump and other people that they wanted to destroy politically and,
Right.
personally.
Personally, yeah.
I said, you watch out. You uncover somebody's nakedness, God's going to strip the covers back off of you. It's going to be measure for measure. You mete this out, it's going to come back on you. And what's his name? Northam? What's his name? Northam.
Ralph.
Right. Okay. So did you see the advertisement that he endorsed when he was running for governor against the other guy, against the Republican, and had the guy in the pickup truck and running these people down, and with the Confederate flag, making all those accusations, which were baseless. Uh-huh. Now look what's happening. So this is an example of what we're talking about. And I will go out on a limb and I will say, you're going to see more and more and more of this. The guy who's the lieutenant governor, that's,
Fairfax. Justin Fairfax.
Who knows whether or not it's true, but look at what's beginning to happen. Tom Brokaw. Look, he's been accused of all these different things. He had jumped on the bandwagon against, Trump and others. I'm just saying that this is a universal law that you cannot get around. If you are going to mete this out, it's going to be given back to you measure for measure. If you're going to uncover someone's nakedness, your nakedness is going to be stripped. And I believe that's what's happening. I personally believe that's what's happening. And so this Northam guy, God bless you, Virginia, but you kind of made a blunder there as far as I'm concerned. And when the Democrats are turning on you, Kamala Harris is turning on you, when you've lost them and you've lost Elizabeth Warren, you're toast.
People that have, let me just say, skeletons in their background as well.
Oh yeah.
But the thing of it is, it's like the heat was on for Northam to resign, and it was turned up. NAACP, everybody came out, and said you need to step down, and so it's like they really wanted this lieutenant governor Fairfax to come in. They really wanted this guy to take his place, and then all of a sudden, here comes this bad stuff about Fairfax, and it's kind of like, well, and this was the craziest thing I've ever heard on NBC and the Today Show. And I read this because I don't watch NBC or the Today Show, so I didn't see it. But they were saying, this one reporter on there is like, why is it, or co-host, why is it all of a sudden now we're hearing stuff about blackface? Why is that coming about now? And then it's because of President Trump. That's why. And I'm serious. They made the connection that kind of like all of this is because of President Trump. It's his fault that, this was in Northam's medical yearbook. Northam may have done this. Fairfax may be guilty of stuff or whatever. But this whole blackface thing is all because of President Trump. I mean, how far crazy can you go?
Well, it totally different subject, but related in that regard. When on The View, which I don't watch, Whoopi Goldberg is in a kind of a small way, I guess, defending the kid that had the MAGA hat, and the Native Americans beating the tom-tom in his face, and she's saying, why do we always jump to the conclusions when we see one little snippet? And you remember what Joy Behar said. It's because we're desperate to get Trump out of office. So that's the issue. That's what's behind a lot of this kind of stuff, but again, measure for measure. And oh, by the way, I found it interesting. I'm trying to be polite here, that the state legislator from Virginia who introduced the bill that would, abort babies right up into the time of birth. And then this is what the governor of Virginia comes out and is commenting on, a day or two later. And then when all this other comes out, even though he defended her, was stepping up to plate for her. Now she's turned on him. So they're starting to devour one another. Now,
Yeah.
there's that carnal side of me that wants to be giddy and snicker. But the bottom line is you can't do these kinds of things and expect to always get away with it. And by that, I mean, you rail baseless accusations at people. It eventually comes back to you.
Yeah, that was Kathy Tran in that state legislature who now is backtracking herself and saying, well, I really didn't say, and the governor really didn't say that this was infanticide that we were talking about, that a baby who is outside of the womb after a botched abortion can be left to die. That was only about, and they released a statement saying, no, the governor misspoke. They're only talking about babies who aren't going to survive anyway, that have some disease.
Right.
And they're playing God again, because how do they know that some baby isn't going to miraculously survive? There have been plenty of women who have been told to get an abortion because their babies wouldn't survive, and their children now are 30 years old. So, kind of bad. Don said he's trash and should resign. His VP is not much better. It was him. It's his page, Don said, and that Fairfax has come out and said, these are all allegations, and if anybody speaks out against me, I'm going to sue you for lying. Other things have come out about him after that. So all allegations, and he'll have time, I guess.
Yeah, the Washington Post was not really going to follow up on it because these were sketchy accusations. Nobody else was there that couldn't corroborate it. Interesting.
Yeah. But even the Washington Post is saying, no, he misquoted us. We didn't say that it was wrong or whatever. We found out it was false. We were going to do it, but we didn't have, enough people, like you said, corroborating it. So even the Washington Post isn't defending him, and that's bad. Let's see. Darlene, she's always said she would step down when we're talking about Ruth on that one. Let me just go. Bethany said, that's like a 3-year-old saying, I don't remember eating the cookies with crumbs in their mouths. That's when you were talking about Ralph Northam.
Yeah.
I think that honestly, that if you look at Ralph Northam's past, there's probably other things that if you could easily find, if he's willing to put a picture like that in his yearbook. I'm just saying. Darlene said false accusations will reverse on all of us, and that is the spiritual principle. Northam ran a horrible and ad against Gillespie, accusing him of being a racist. It was bad, and that's what you were talking about, Bill. And some people are saying they think that this is all a distraction, that they're bringing this out about blackface with Northam only because of the abortion issue in Virginia, and they want to kind of put that behind them. I don't myself, I don't believe that, but I know other people do believe that.
Well, but, speaking to that issue, that is the most vile thing the man has done, as far as I'm concerned. I think Carol, is making a comment along those lines. And I agree with you, Carol. The pictures, all of those things that they may represent, that's one thing. But the fact that he would even say, infer that a living child outside of its mother's womb, we're going to deliberate whether or not the child will be made comfortable, but we're going to have a discussion between the doctor, whether or not we want this baby to live or, go ahead and terminate it. That's the worst possible thing that you could ever pin to this guy. And the people who are of the same mindset, the state legislator there, I forgot her name, Tram, is that what you said?
Kathy Tran.
Yeah. And people in New York, like Cuomo, and people in Vermont that are trying to push this kind of legislation. The Democratic Party, and I'm not giving the Republican Party a pass on this, mind you, but the Democratic Party is becoming the party of death. I mean, if forget all of the other stuff, forget the Trump stuff. It's just look at the abortion thing. If this is what they are, this is what they support, they are the party of death. And I say that with no reservation whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's really sad. Yesterday, Senator Ben Sasse tried to, put another bill in that would basically say that if a child was born after a botched birth abortion and it was alive, that he wanted to make it so that you would immediately have to take that baby to the hospital to keep it alive, and that any doctor that went against that went against the protocol that he was putting in the bill, then you could have criminal prosecution charges brought against you. And the Democrats are like, No, we're not going to do that. They wanted a unanimous consent vote, just like, let's get it in there because we know everybody's for this. And the Democrats said, nope, we're not going to vote for it because there's already a bill, like a 2002 bill, that declares that a baby is now a human being outside of the womb and gives some protection. But the Ben Sass bill was going to make you do certain requirements in order to keep that baby alive, and the Democrats didn't want to do it. So I agree with you. They're becoming at least the party of infanticide. And that, if you're proud of that label, then I would say everybody in the Democrat Party, you need to leave the Democrat Party because your party left you a long time ago. And if you're voting for somebody like that, I don't know how you square that with being a Christian. That's just my opinion, but that's between you and God.
Well, Bill, I'm just going to say something to that, because I've encountered this issue, with ministers who support certain candidates for whatever reason, but these candidates are pro-abortion, pro-gay rights, pro-this, things that cannot be reconciled with what the scripture says. And the bottom line is, when people do that, they try to dance and they try to justify it. But the bottom line is that they're putting their politics ahead of the biblical principle. Now, the comeback is, well, you got Trump in there and you got conservatives that are supporting Trump, and he's done this and he's been accused of that. Okay. But I don't see Trump saying we need to murder children. I don't see Trump saying we need to, a lot of these other things. So, yeah, I get it that politics is a very passionate issue. We have convictions about things, but the Messiah was neither Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. And so we need to make sure that our principles are based not on what the Democratic platform is or the Republican platform or the Libertarian. We need to make sure our principles are based on what Scripture says. And so how do they justify it? I don't think it can be justified, not biblically anyway.
Well, and what I was thinking yesterday, this is before Ben Sass's bill came up, and I was talking to some people. I honestly think at this point, and I would be willing, I'm on inactive status with my, as an attorney. So I don't practice law. I'm inactive status. I would be willing to go active again if this law passed. And that what I'm saying is that I think that any baby born from a botched abortion should immediately, and even before, but let's say afterwards, if you want to have that argument that it's still the woman's body, when they're out of the body, it's no longer the woman's body, in my mind, but that child should immediately have an attorney, an advocate who is calling for them to be kept alive, and that anybody doing that would be murder. And if that has to be a person and an attorney in every single abortion clinic, I'm willing to go to as many as I can go to. And I'm hoping that other attorneys would do that. And I really think that as people, we need to speak up and start doing things like that and start demanding that those things happen. And Bill, what was sad for me is that the day after this New York law passed that says that you can let a baby die outside of the womb after a botched abortion, there were protesters in front of Governor Cuomo's office, but those protesters were over cabs and cabbies and how much cabbies were going to make or what money they were going to lose. Nobody that I know of, nothing on the news, nothing that I saw, protested the killing of babies in infanticide. Nobody.
Well, that's shameful, number one. Since you brought Cuomo up, did you see that he's scratching his head as to why the revenues in New York have dropped $2.3 billion? What you want to bet they're going to continue to drop? This guy's face is going to be wrinkled. Let me tell you, Beth, my wife. Two things. She wanted to be an attorney. I messed that up. I met her and we got married, and that all got messed up. But she's long said, she wishes that she, if she was an attorney, she wished she was in a financial situation that she could just go pro bono on all these things, or whatever the term is, that that you're an advocate for people just because this is an issue of what is just and what is unjust. And she brought up something that we were talking about last night. It was one of those little memes that you see, but it was very profound. I thought that liberal America thinks it's okay to murder a child in its womb, and apparently now after it's emerged from the womb, but thinks you should go to jail if you spank your child's butt.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the way they think. And I am coming to believe that liberalism is a mental disorder. It's certainly a spiritual disorder, at least the way it is manifested today. They are becoming a cult of death.
Yeah, I mean, it really is sad, and it's sad to watch it happening, and people, are kind of wondering what to do. And Darlene said there's a day of mourning and repentance on February 23rd nationwide. God is about to move in a mighty way, and we need to get involved. I don't know how God has the patience with us to sit here and watch this, in a continuation of even. Not only are you talking about abortion inside the womb, now we're talking about letting kids die outside. And I don't understand. I still don't understand right now why Gosnell is in prison. What did he do that was any different than what the law in New York just passed and says that you can do? I don't get that. I mean, he killed babies that, the heads, I guess, were coming out of the birth canal. What is the difference? I don't understand.
Well, he should be in prison.
Oh, absolutely, he should be.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, but he should be in prison, and this atrocity should be brought to a close. Now, I'm going to say something, and I want to choose my words very, very carefully here. But this goes back to you mentioning that these protesters are out in front of Cuomo's office or what have you, protesting the price of a cabbie, what have you, but nobody protesting, this atrocity that is being unleashed in the state of New York. There are examples in Scripture, and like I said, I want to choose my words very carefully here. There are examples in Scripture where people of God did things to put a stop to certain things that God didn't. He didn't condemn them, he rewarded them. Now, here's what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting violence or anything like that, because I know that there are people that would, go off half-cocked to do something stupid. That's not what I'm talking about. But the point is that there does come a time that we have to stand up and do something like you were just talking about, and not be intimidated by the Cuomos and the governor, whatever his name is, and Schumer and Pelosi. There comes a time we're going to have to stand up. And I believe what we would find is if we took a stand, again, I want to stress, I'm not talking about anything violent. I'm not talking about anything aggressive physically in that regard, but I am talking about standing against this kind of mindset, these kinds of actions, and saying, no, we're not going to bow down to that. I think if we would take the initiative to do something like that, I just feel like the Creator would be pleased by that. I think he would endorse it. And I want to believe that he would empower it if we take the first step. So again,
Absolutely.
We're not talking about anything, to threaten anybody physically, violently. That's not what I'm talking about. But we are talking about taking a stand. And when we've done all we can do to stand, that's what Paul said we're supposed to do against the fiery darts of the enemy.
Yeah, what you're talking about is doing everything morally, ethically, and legally that you can do to come against it. And the biggest thing that we can do is to speak out against it. And if you legally can protest, yes, we should absolutely do that. One interesting thing, too, I wanted to bring up, because Carol was talking here about, this is a baby inside the womb. This isn't butterflies go, turn into caterpillars, and cells in your body turn into human beings. This Kathy Tran, who had the bill in Virginia with Governor Northam was talking about, on the same day that she introduced that bill to allow late-term abortion right up until the time of birth, she also introduced a bill to protect caterpillars.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable that these are the people we're actually sending to lead us. I don't know what district in Virginia she represents, but good gracious, I would imagine somewhere close to Washington. It may not be, though. I don't know. But unbelievable. My dad's was from Virginia. I mean, he would be flipping out right now.
Oh, yeah.
But George Washington was a Virginian. Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, all these guys. But Virginia I don't know what's happening. It's turning into a liberal haven, I guess.
Well, maybe because the people of Virginia aren't standing up. However, the people of Virginia stood up enough and made enough noise that they tabled that bill for now. And I think the nation stood up and made a lot of noise. And that we have to do that as well. Now, Bethany said next is genocide of elderly. And Linda says we are spreading this culture of death throughout the world. Absolutely true. Carol said, I pray God will stop abortion in the future in the USA. Pray for America, everybody. God is, I think, would be the only one right now that could do that, because it would take a miracle at this point to do that in the direction that we are going. Darlene said presence can be enough. Abby Johnson said just presence and prayer turn many women away from their abortion mills. I think that we need to support the birthing centers more. I think that we need to find women, or if we run into a woman out there, who's considering abortion, or at some organization that you're working at, and that a woman tells you that she wants to have an abortion, then you ought to talk to her about the birthing centers and talk to the men who get the women pregnant, and try to convince the women to have abortions. That there are birthing centers. And I also think, Bill, that we need to make adoption in the United States more affordable for people so that people will consider that.
I've got some friends that are in ministry in South Carolina, and they pastor a church. And I'm going to make this a very long story short. They, first of all, personally, they have adopted, I don't know how many children. They have been foster parents to I don't know how many children, and they've done it they're not rich, they don't have a lot of money, but they've made it happen because they feel like that's something they need to do. But as pastors of this church, what they've also done is they have built houses, large houses, debt free, and will put people in there who the only thing will put you in there, let you live there for free, but you have to be willing to bring in foster children, adopt children. And so they're building house after house trying to do this. And more churches are getting behind them in this effort. And so they're building homes that if you'll agree to live there and adopt these children that are unwanted, and get with these women, these young girls who are having babies, and they're looking at abortion as being their only avenue, try to turn them around from that. So that is just one example of somebody who said, you know what, let's do something to try to make this a better situation. Let's try to turn this around. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Now, we're talking about it. We have to do it. And so this is where we need wisdom from on high. We need, okay, God, give us insight, help us to plan and to come up with the witty inventions that will fund these kinds of things and help us to see how to do this. And if we take this step, and this is my point, I believe he will, because the politicians aren't going to do it. No. It's not going to happen. I'm all for going to the polls and making our voice heard, but the Republicans had an opportunity to defund Planned Parenthood, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, not going to happen. Not going to happen because it's where money's involved. Darlene said we can at least support organizations financially if we have the means. Let's see. Vicky said, keeps moving. Trump mentioned in debates that if Clinton were elected, she would condone this type of behavior, and she didn't comment on that, regarding abortions and
they laughed at him for saying that. They scoffed at him for saying something like that.
Exactly. And that's when you know that it's true. That because the left always does that when they know that they're going to do it, or they're doing it themselves. Sounds like Virginia is getting too privileged that they have lost touch with the foundation of God, Carol said. As Bill mentioned, measure for measure, choosing life brings blessings, choosing death brings curses. And so it will come to the revenue, to the status, to the reputation in each house of any government. The curses will come upon them. They may not serve the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but that doesn't matter. His word will be made known, measure for measure.
Amen, Nancy.
And Bethany said most women can't conceive the lifetime emotional trauma after abortion. I've talked to some personally who never recover and eventually died from unresolved guilt. And that's, unfortunately, that's true. I mean, but like you said, we, your friends did something. They could have looked at it and said, my gosh, this is overwhelming. I just can't do anything. But if you take a step by step and you take a step, God will take a step with you. Bill, is what I think you were saying.
That's exactly what I'm saying. They stepped out there in faith. They didn't have money to do this, but they just made it happen. And then now they've got other people rallying around them that, and supporting this financially, are looking to support it financially so they can build more and more of these homes. And I just think that I have the utmost respect for these people, number one,
yes.
And that they would do that. And that's, yeah, I realize that it's a small little ripple in a big lake, if you will. But nonetheless, it makes a difference in a handful of lives, and who knows what comes from that, what's consequential to that,
Well, I was going to say too, as a licensed psychotherapist, I dealt with a lot of kids in foster care and at-risk kids. And I'm telling you, anybody who takes on foster kids, you are taking on every problem that ever happened to that child and every bad thing that was ever done. It is a commitment, and your friends should be, commended for taking on something like that, because that it is not easy, and a lot of people wouldn't do it for that reason. But it may be a small ripple when you're talking about a couple of children, but when you're talking about correcting their lives and making their lives better, and what effect that will have on the next generation and the next generation, it's you can't put a price tag on that, and that's expansive. Let's see, where and how do you protest? Carol said. Well, Carol, I think you can do it locally in your town. Make sure that you're permitted to do so. But you can go out in front of abortion clinics, and if it's allowed in your state to walk up and down in the sidewalk, not blocking people. But and that's just why you need to go and find out if you need a permit or whatever before you do this. But you can go out in front of abortion clinics. You could talk to women before they get to abortion clinics. You could talk to your church about doing new things. You could protest a doctor's office, again, if it's legal to do so, out in front of the doctor's office, that its doctor performs abortions and that you're against it. I mean, any thoughts that you have, Bill?
Well, I'm not against that. If someone wants to do that, I'm more of the camp that instead of pointing out what's wrong, let's start doing what's right, and start, bringing our focus on that. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't talk about these things. That's not what I'm saying. I said, but when it gets right down to it, why are these young women going into these places? I don't think there's a one size fits all answer, but I guess I want to believe that if they weren't inundated with that abortion is a good thing, abortion is your right, there's nothing wrong with it, it's not a child, it's not a living human being. If they weren't inundated with this all the time to kind of grease the track, so to speak, into these abortion camps, that if we had these other issues going on, and I know that there are people working every day to give these young ladies another option.
Yep.
But maybe it's one of the things that we can do is to talk those things up even more, so that perhaps, the people like my friends, things like that get more attention, and these ministries that are working with young ladies to give them these options. And one-on-one, talking to these young women and letting them know you don't have to go the abortion route. There is a better way to do this. There are people who are on lists a mile long waiting to adopt people. Of course, there again, we have government, standing in the way. So I don't know that there's a, one size fits all, because you got to do what you feel like the Creator's put in your heart to do in your world. And if that's going and standing in front of an abortion clinic and praying and talking with people, that's exactly what you should do. I would advise that you be very careful, because there's crazy people out there.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I'm more inclined to let's see what we can do in a positive way. And maybe, step out in faith like our friends have, and let's see what God does with that, at least making the difference in the lives of, a handful of people. And there's something to be said for that.
Now, what I would like to see, this is taking it, not the focus right on the woman. And this is something else that, as you were talking, Bill, that I thought about that I think is really needed. I think we need men to talk to men, like at risk, let's say boys, usually is what the case, but teenage boys about the responsibilities. If a woman becomes pregnant, if you get a woman pregnant, here are your responsibilities of fatherhood. This is what could happen. Why you shouldn't talk your significant other or girlfriend into getting an abortion. I don't think that's out there. I don't think anybody goes and talks to boys about this problem. Not that I've seen. It's all about the women.
Well, you're right. But we get into other issues here. So many homes where there is no father to talk to those boys, or situations where the father has abdicated his role as father and leader and priest of the home, kind of giving that over to the woman for her to take care of because I'm too busy working. And by the way, there are many men who struggle with that. I've struggled with that from time to time. And of course, I have a wife that reminds me of when you're doing that again, but no, that in all seriousness, you're absolutely right. Probably shouldn't say this, but I grew up in a culture where there were men who encouraged wrong behavior because that was part of being a man. No, it's not. It's not. And so, those are things that need to be done. But look, it's only going to come from believing men. It's going to come from those men that have put Scripture as the foundation of their life, their home, their family. And so we do need to reach out to these young men and those especially who are fatherless and speak into their lives. And I know that there are ministries that do that, but that is another component of this that we need to look at. I've always tried to instruct my boys that, there are certain, I don't want to say standards, that's not the right word, but maybe expectations that culture places upon guys, that you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that. And that's just part of being a guy. And, I've tried to counter that and say, no, that's not what the Creator says. That's what culture says. And as a footnote to that, when we were kids, they used to show these little films in health class to the guys that were supposed to freak you out enough that you didn't want to do anything. So maybe that's something else we should look at. But
bring those back. Now, Vicki said Northam got $2 million from Planned Parenthood, and that's part of the reason that he's probably still in there today, because Planned Parenthood is probably out there rallying around to keep him in there. It's all about money, and that they're getting baby parts from Virginia as well. We individually need to be led by the Holy Spirit, talk and yes, try to help, I guess. Bethany said, yes, more billboards for birth clinics and adoptions. They're doing it in Oklahoma as well, too, because it just moves so quickly sometimes. You would get rid of abortion tomorrow if a law were passed today that said custody automatically goes to the dad until the child reaches 18. The only exception would be cases involving sexual abuse, etc. Females need to understand that babies are a big responsibility, not something cuddly to keep the guy. Males need to understand that it's a lifelong commitment, not a one-night stand. Well, yeah.
Well, what I'm hearing here is what we all know. It's just a matter of common sense, common decency, doing what's right, And
but we don't teach that.
I know we don't. But when you make a mistake, you bear the consequence of that mistake. We're not evolving; we are devolving.
Yeah, we are.
We're not becoming smarter. We're turning into animals.
Yeah.
That's what's happening here. And I say that in a very general way. I hope everybody understands. I'm not calling anybody here an animal. I'm just saying mankind is becoming animalistic in his worldview, in his way. And we're not getting smarter. We're not getting more ingenious. We are becoming animals. We're behaving in many ways.
Barbaric. Let me just say
thank you. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to think of the proper word without being too, too brazen or crass
You
here.
got to say what it is, though, and that's, I mean, when you're talking about infanticide, I don't think you can get more barbaric and abortion. I'm sorry, I'm just going to call it what it is. Um, and it's like
Well,
Nancy said, animals have no shame, and I think we're getting to the point. What you're saying, we're getting to the point we have no shame either.
well, and this is something that you see in a couple of Bible stories, and I know we're running short on time here, but there are examples in the book of Genesis. There's an example in the book of Judges, I believe it is, where people visited someone, went into a town, and somebody was there that had a conscience. This is what Lot did with the angels that came into Sodom. This is what a man in Gibeah did with a priest that was coming through town. Uh, in both instances, they were going to spend the night in the town square. And so Lot went out, and this other instance, this other man went out, and he said, no, you don't need to sleep in the town square. Obviously, it was dangerous. And so when they take them into the different houses, both stories, people come knocking, men come knocking on the door, demanding that you turn those visitors out to us and let us do whatever we want to with them. Okay. In other words, out in public, just abusing them. All right. So I'm trying to be polite here, but it had to do with sodomy. It had to do with homosexuality. It had to do with violence. It had to do with all of these things that we're dealing with right now. And there's no respect for anyone's person. There's no respect for life. That's what we're devolving into. Well, the handwriting's on the wall if we keep going down this road, because we know what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain. And by the way, the story in the book of Judges doesn't end up very well either. Lots of people die. So this is what we're becoming. Now, how do we counter this? It's overwhelming when but we have a little expression that we use around our house, and I'm sure other people have heard it, and it has nothing to do with this topic, but just anything that seems overwhelming. You can't eat a dinosaur all at one time. You eat it one bite at a time, and that's what we have to do. We just have to say, Father, what is it that I can do? What can my family do to make a step toward what is good and what is whole and what is pure and virtuous? And if enough of us make the decision to, I'm not saying stop talking about it, but in addition to talking about it, do something about it. If enough of us do that, we can make an impact, and God will multiply that.
Absolutely. And Bethany said even animals have higher principles in some cases, and that sadly is true. We're supposed to be, above that.
Yeah, well, chickens don't.
Oh God. And now Carol said, no, somebody else was saying a minute ago, and I lost who it was, but they were saying that Renee, I think, is saying that they could see where a girl would get so scared, that she would go to abortion as her only way out. And we need to somehow stop that too, that there'd be a place for somebody to, in a position like that, to go and talk to somebody that isn't just Planned Parenthood. I think that's the problem. They're like, yes, come on, let's do it. I don't know how we've got to do something that gets to those people. See, the problem is we don't have a lot of times as much money as Planned Parenthood to go out there and do the marketing for us.
No, because the government's not giving us billions of dollars.
Right? Exactly. And we, it's very difficult to reverse that. But we have God, and God can do it. And if we, as we've been talking about it, if one person makes that step forward, then God is going to exponentially, I believe, multiply that good. And so we shouldn't let something like funding, keep us from doing it.
Go ahead and say what you're going to say. I got a point I want to make, though.
No, go ahead and make the point.
Well, I know that we've been talking about this topic last couple of weeks, and I know that people want to talk about different things, but look, a lot of those other things that are going on are secondary as far as I'm concerned to this issue, because this is about, are we going to turn into a nation of murderers? Because it certainly seems like we're on that track. All right. And so then how do you counter this? How do you do this? What do you do? Yeah, there's all these other methods, and we've tried all these other things. And I'm not saying it doesn't make a difference in somebody's life, but overall, the trend is moving the other direction. All right. So it can be so overwhelming that we become immobilized. We feel like there's nothing we can do. There's no hope here. It's just a lost cause. And it might turn out that way, but we cannot ignore this, that the Creator takes things that seem insignificant and he makes them very significant. And the principle is found in the tabernacle or the temple. There was a lot of different components to the tabernacle. There were screens and beams and hooks and veils and all the different furnishings where the sanctuary was concerned. But there were these little pieces, they were clasped. And if you went into the tabernacle and looked around, you wouldn't even notice them. You wouldn't notice them. You'd be looking at all the big things, all the beautiful things. You wouldn't notice these clasps more than likely. But the clasp, according to the scripture, are the little thing that's holding everything together. In other words, it's accentuating the significance of the insignificant. And so there's no one out there listening or watching whose contribution, whose part of this is insignificant. It might be the key to a lot of things happening around you. I go back to my friends. They took a step and now other things are happening and developing. And yeah, it's not changing the minds of the politicians, but maybe it's changing the minds of the people who would go to those abortion clinics, who would go to Planned Parenthood. Because Planned Parenthood goes out of business if they don't have anybody to perform abortions on.
Yeah.
So
true.
that's what we need to consider. And if we take a step, I am convinced that the Creator will multiply it.
Bethany said that we need to support the birthing centers, which, we absolutely do. I think that's one of the very first things that we need to do, make sure that they are funded and have people that are giving to them. It was kind of sad in my town. I was invited one day to a meeting that they were going to have as a birthing center, a local birthing center. It was held at a church, and people had invited me to go because they knew of an interest, that I have in this topic. And this was a function where, people of the church and in the community are, yeah, we'll be there. And Bill, it was the lowest turnout that I've ever seen in my life. And it was the saddest thing that I'd ever seen in my life. And it was such a great message that the people were talking about, and then how they have the woman come in and listen to the heartbeat and how many lives that they had saved because of it. And people, I think if it had been a Planned Parenthood meeting, we probably would have filled the church. But because it was on the birthing center, it was like, okay, well, don't need to be. I don't know what the reasons were, but it was not good to see.
Well, I am going to go against my own desires and will, and I am going to pray for the governor of Virginia, because if it were left to me, somebody who would do that, don't have a lot for him. But I'm going to make a point to pray for the man, that God will intervene in his life and encounter him and engage him. And I'm hopeful that the man will come to repentance and that he will do the right thing, and that God will come face to face with these people who are part of this cult of death and show them the end road of what they're promoting, what they're supporting, what they're endorsing. I'm just going to start praying that. It might seem like it's not going to happen, but I'm going to do that. And if we would do those kinds of things, plus taking action, doing something with our hands and our feet, God's going to multiply that. I know that. We are living in a very wicked day. We know that.
Yes.
And some people take the approach, well, the Bible said it's going to be this way. It's going to be lawless. What am I supposed to do? I'm just going to sit back and wait till, Messiah returns and just, hallelujah, go to heaven. Well, that's not going to stand up very well when you have to stand before him and say and give an account for, what did you do with what I entrusted to you?
No,
we're going to have to give an account. So I think that's what we're trying to say today.
Yeah. And people, Luann was talking, I saw somebody a while ago, Darlene, I believe, was talking about Abby Johnson. There's a movie coming out. I think she was an abortion nurse and did it for several years. And And I'm glad to see that she's no longer doing it. Glad to see, we talked about the doctor last week who performed abortions, and once he had a daughter and then she died, he could no longer perform the abortions. And so I'm glad to see that. And let's pray for all those who are considering to have an abortion, that they will have a change of heart and they will find the right person that will lead them back to God's principles and God's will for them to allow their baby to live. So we are out of time. This is an hour that flew by. I want to thank everybody for being here. Your comments and questions, as always, are amazing. We thank you so much for supporting our show, so much for sharing our show. And until next week, God bless you. Take care.